I'm going to present a couple of areas of research that RMIT is playing in, which I lead, and give you some examples of the kind of things we're doing to try and get us to regenerative futures through the pathway of sustainability. And I think Ollie set the scene very nicely as to why design's important. I'm simply going to add this one slide on it, which is that we have an involvement in the problem as designers. We lock in environmental impact through our practice. This is an old statistic that came from RMIT researchers in the 1990s through the Centre for Design. Helen Lewis, John Gassakis, Tim Grant and others who now operate at very high levels in government and consulting in sustainability did work with industry, with companies back in the 2000s and 1990s, and they saw the environmental impacts being locked in. And we know that that means we have a pivotal part to play in transforming systems, products, services and systems before they happen so that we can do better to sustainability and beyond to regenerative futures. So the first thing I'm going to focus on is a national strategy that we did for the Federal Government of Australia on driving design for circularity. The project purpose, the department, Department of Climate Change, Energy Efficiency and Water, proposed was that we needed to identify opportunities to leverage design, innovation and sustainability to strengthen Australia's competitive position in the growing green economy by enabling design for environmental good. Enabling design for environmental good has quite a positive ring to it. We were the ones that came up with that at RMIT because we felt like we needed this to be an enabling project, a project that would help design practitioners, companies operating in the design space to be able to flourish with ideas and then deployment of practice around sustainability. So the first thing we did was we tried to define a set of eco-design principles from the global literature. Interestingly, eco-design has a very specific connotation in academia and in industry government circles because it harks back to the days of green design that Ollie had quite a long way down in the bottom left of his diagram, where we're just trying to make things a little bit better through design, maybe 5% better or 10% better on energy efficiency or the materials we use or the way something can be deconstructed for disassembly. However, we wanted to enrich that term. We needed to pick a term for one. We needed something that would actually resonate. But in doing so, I think we reinvigorated the term with a contemporary set of principles that we need to try and achieve to get circularity going in Australia. Those four principles are up there around regenerative design, designing like, with, and as nature, I'll add, maybe as an addition to this slide. Thinking in systems and designing for life cycles. Thinking of the whole system, not just our little part of it. Designing for zero waste and also making better design choices, which involves ethical decision making, collective well-being and other sort of social metrics. We then deployed a methodology for the federal government which involved the global literature review that helped us set up our eco-design practice and influences. We then went through an iterative design process, essentially consulting with industry, government, not-for-profits through interviews and 5 co-design workshops. This all happened whilst COVID hit. So we were intending to hold these in person. What this meant was we had to move to an online environment, which had actually quite a lot of advantages. It meant we could include a whole lot more expertise we weren't going to be able to, frankly, afford with $380,000 worth of funding. Plus, we weren't going to fly everyone around Australia, which probably goes against the point of trying to drive sustainability outcomes through a research project. We then explored options for cross-sectorial cutting levers that were enabling the maximum uptake of this kind of new paradigm for eco-design and identify the parties that could take ownership. So we got everyone in the room. It was a virtual room, but you can see there, these are globally and nationally significant companies, government departments, peak bodies, and not-for-profit groups as well. They particularly covered 4 sectors of focus, which I'll talk about in a second. The first thing the project delivered was a set of 10 cross-cutting levers. Those 10 levers covered areas of how do we finance the changes, how do we put up big sums of money to try and activate this space, how do we change policy and regulation so that we are enabling designers to do their part, those who fund designers to commission the right outcomes, how do we also set the policies that drive standards that mean the right things are coming into the country and block the wrong things. And also, how do we educate both industry, and I'm not just talking about educating designers. In fact, we were quite specific on not focusing on designers as the problem. We've been training designers for 30 years in sustainability. They get it. We get it. We actually need to start training the executives and the business leaders and the marketers, the powerful disciplines in industry in particular that don't get it or haven't been trained in it. So we actually need to be getting into business schools and executive training modules with the Australian Institute of Company Directors, those kind of forums to get the outcomes we need. We also need to educate the public. So behaviour change campaigns nationally with big sums of money to fund that. I'm currently running or helping run a behaviour change campaign with the next initiative I'll talk about in a second. Our seed funding is $10 million. We need 80 million. That's how you run a 10-year behaviour change campaign on TV, radio and on billboards and in print media. It doesn't cost nothing. You need to buy the ad space, you need to pay for the agencies to create the creative that is going to engage and be sticky. So these are the types of things that we've suggested. There are reports for this online, so you can access these freely. There are some links in the presentation to that. We particularly focused on fashion and textiles, the plastics industry, the electronic goods industry, and the built environment, so building and construction, because they were 4 priority areas or sectors where we could see the most opportunity for uptake of our ideas, as well as potentially the most need for change. Impacts thus far, we've already seen the Minister taking direct quotes from our work in her press releases. The Circular Economy Ministerial Advisory Group, who was chaired by John Thwaites from Monash University, Professor there, they included our reports in their work, and they have enacted changes like suggesting the National Reconstruction Fund, a $15 billion fund, to have caveats around funding regarding circularity. Now that's a direct national major financial impact that's happening, that we hope that we have informed through our suggestions that you need to start doing that in the big buckets of funding around Australia. We've also got extended producer responsibility schemes, which are part of the suggestions we also worked on, and the partners in the project that we had, the Australian Fashion Council and the Australian Furniture Association, are the ones driving that, who were part of our co-design work. So we'd hope that we had again engendered those changes on those initiatives, and we also won an Australian Design Award for the strategy as well. I won't dwell on these, but again, some fairly significant national leaders had very good things to say about what we've done, which again adds to the esteem and I suppose also adds to the credibility of the work. They're involved in the work, and they have, basically given it the rubber stamp. So we're hoping more and more impacts will flow from this work. Second initiative I just wanted to highlight was this national program that we're driving to end food waste in Australia. So there is clear benefits to tackling food loss and waste globally and in Australia. We waste about 30 to 40% of our waste, of our food that we produce globally. That equates to a multi-trillion-dollar problem of waste. It's just clearly stupidity that we're wasting that much money. It relates to a 10% fraction of our climate change emissions. The food loss and waste in the world, not the food system, just the food loss and waste, based on the carbon emissions, particularly around methane production in degradation, as well as the embedded emissions through the food system that we've wasted as well. So there's a huge environmental argument to be acting on food loss and waste. And, you know, locally there are some big numbers. $1 billion problem in Australia, multi-billion dollar problem. The other social issue is we have a huge hunger problem, food poverty problem in the world, but also in Australia. We have up to 2 million people in food poverty in a developed nation at any one time. That's close to 10%, about 7% of the population. So there is a huge social argument to act. This is just some work that FIAL did, Food Innovation Australia Limited, on where the waste occurs in the Australian supply chain. You can see there's big spikes in the household in hospitality, but also, you know, earlier in the chain upstream in industry. So Australia has committed to halving food waste by 2030. Sustainable Development Goal 12 has a target 12.3 to halve food waste by 2030. So we've done that. The CRC, a cooperative research centre, is a research structure in Australia that's set up by the government, industry and not-for-profits with the academy to tackle big wicked problems. And that wicked problem was funded in 6 years ago in 2019. So we've been going for 6 years. We've now built some seed funding to go with the CRC around the National Behaviour Change Campaign to end food waste, as well as set up a industry action pillar around a voluntary agreement for Food Pact, where our teams go out with industry to try and benchmark and work out where the hotspots of food loss and waste are happening in the supply chain, and then give them the tools to act. So you can see there are multiple pillars starting to build out. The start of that was the CRC, which is, as Chris said, $121 million of funding over a 10-year period to drive R&D projects to halve food waste by 2030. So we have 3 programs to engage industry and consumers to reduce food waste across the supply chain and to transform any waste that we can't reduce. The program we run at RMIT is the Reduce program, so it's the program I lead, which is all around how do we interact in the supply chain, in people's homes, and also in food service context to reduce food waste to hopefully nothing if we can. We tend to work up the top of the food waste hierarchy where we're trying to prevent and reduce or repurpose into high value goods. So it might be nutraceuticals, food ingredients, other food products. It might be products in other industries like the building industry, it might be satellite industries. We tend not to work in the lower section of this, which is around composting, waste to energy, where we see low value type outcomes and often, frankly, close to linear options. We'd rather, you know, feed people and also keep material flowing in a circular way. We have a strategy to get there around halving food waste, so 30 million tonnes is what we need to reduce in Australia. We want to drive $2 billion worth of industry profitability. We want to get more food donation and train a whole lot of industry people. We're also training the future leaders through 40 PhDs and master's positions. We've also opened up another tranche of PhD positions in industry roles with KPMG. So there's a lot of work going on with, again, some nationally significant partners. You can see there's industry, peak bodies, governments, all the food charities like Food Bank, OzHarvest, all the ones you'd probably be aware of if you do know this space at all. RMIT is not alone. We work with 11 other research partners. So I manage this suite of research partners as well as the RMIT projects that come through my door for the Reduce program. And really, in Reduce, like I said, we have a focus on reduction through mapping resource flows, so tools, data systems, digital physical systems, interventions, packaging and processing solutions. It's an interesting area, packaging, because it has a really negative connotation with both consumers and sustainability and definitely regenerative futures in general. But in the food system, if you acknowledge that packaging plays a role to protect food and elongate shelf life in the current system and potentially in transformed systems, the alternative is reducing packaging to nil and having a system where you produce more food waste and potentially even higher environmental impact. So there is quite a paradox with the packaging and food system issue, which we try and tackle in a practical way through the CRC. We also have supply chain intervention, innovation scaling up in particular commodities, and we also work in the food donation innovation space. With Transform, we work across all sorts of commodities to upcycle food, turn it into new types of products, new foodstuffs, new types of animal feed solutions, which is another area that we work in. You can see there's all sorts of projects across different types of food commodities. We also work in the identification of technology gaps, toolkits, and policy change. And in Engage, as I talked about, we work in the household, we work on behaviour change, but we also train our future leaders. So that all comes together as End Food Waste Australia. The CRC is the research arm. We have the industry action arm on the ground and the behaviour change campaign. Brief visualisation there of our structure. And just to finish on, this is our sort of, we do measure our impacts. We measure how we're performing across our projects. All the CRC projects and End Food Waste Australia action projects feed into this model. And what this does is it measures our projected food loss and waste reduction, our industry profitability metrics, our rescued food metrics, our job metrics, so how many jobs were created, our future leaders trained, and our greenhouse gas emission reductions. You can see on some of them we're smashing it out of the park. Some of them are on track. Other ones, including the key metric, halving food waste by 2030, is actually behind schedule. Why is that? It's hard. And Ollie made a very good comment at the end of his talk. You know, regenerative futures is hard. It's a vision. And we're hoping we get there, and so do we, with reducing food loss and waste to half. We're also turning into an organisation that's got sustainable, a future beyond the CRC, and we're hoping we can continue the work. If you have any questions about these research initiatives and what we're trying to achieve, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anyone about it, and there's some links there to some of our reports, our websites on our work as well. So thank you for having me.